Hey there, welcome to Ipsy Digs It. I'm Ipsy, and on today's video we are talking about even more 90s romance movies. If you're new here and you're wondering to yourself why I'm making this series or what my definition of a romance movie might be, feel free to check out my first video. I break down all my thoughts on the subject at the very beginning, so if you care to watch, it'll be linked down in the description below. So, what 10 movies are we discussing today? Here they are in chronological order. So, I Married an Axe Murderer, French Kiss, Clueless, Before Sunrise, The Truth About Cats and Dogs, Fifth Element, What Dreams May Come, At First Sight, Runaway Bride, Forces of Nature. No need to beat around the bush. Let's get started with my least favorite of the bunch. Number 10, At First Sight. Amy meets Virgil while she's on a much-needed vacation from her work as an architect. Virgil is a blind massage therapist, and they hang out until she has to return to New York City. When she comes back to visit him, she reveals she did some research and found an amazing eye doctor who thinks he can help Virgil see again. Amy convinces Virgil to have the surgery, and as they navigate his new ability to see, they also have to navigate the complexity of their changing relationship. This movie isn't awful by any means, but it wasn't very good either. There isn't a ton of chemistry between Val Kilmer and Mira Sorvino. The connection between them was kind of awkward, almost like two puzzle pieces that look like they're gonna go together, but then they don't. I also don't think that there's a ton of romantic foundation for the couple. Even though they're two whole characters on their own, Amy being this architect who also has a passion for sculpting, and Virgil living this quiet life in a small town, working as a massage therapist and playing hockey. Even though they both have a lot going for them, I think Amy as a character is just a little too selfish to be a good partner for Virgil. I appreciate that she wants more for Virgil and encourages him to live whatever type of life he wants to lead. But once he starts becoming that person, she grows distant. She starts showing a side of herself that's much more self-absorbed and insensitive. Virgil is going through so much, and yet Amy can't help but make it about her. Even if they do end up together at the end, I don't imagine this relationship will last very long. This movie is actually based on a true story. A man named Shirley Jennings is one of only a handful of people to regain his eyesight after a lifetime of blindness. This experience that Virgil has, the regaining of his sight, was definitely the most interesting part of this movie. The relationship he has with Amy almost feels like an unnecessary hurdle he has to overcome while he's learning to see again. Honestly, I would have enjoyed the movie more without the relationship. For that reason, it's at the bottom of today's list. Number 9, So I Married an Axe Murderer. Charlie is the romantic equivalent to a hypochondriac. Any minute reason he can use to avoid commitment, avoid continuing a relationship, is reason enough to end things. So when he meets Harriet, and they have this next level connection, he's determined not to make the same mistake. Only he starts to notice how past relationships she talks about, places she's been, coincide with the information known about Mrs. X, a female serial killer suspected of murdering her husbands on their honeymoon. I have to be honest, I actually really like this plot. There's not much chemistry between the characters, but there is some really good romantic foundation. Harriet is a badass. She's goofy and witty and confident in who she is. Charlie, on the surface, isn't that bad of a character either. It seems like he spends a lot of his free time writing and performing poetry at a local open mic night. Am I gonna be able to say that? I don't know. And he's got as much goof and wit as Harriet does. They both kind of remind me of Michael Scott and Holly Flax from The Office. I think in the hands of someone other than Mike Myers and with a different screenwriter, this movie could have been really good. I'm not a script snob by any means, so when I can't help but notice the writing, you know it's gotta be pretty bad. There's this one scene where the two are walking together after Charlie helps out Harriet at the butcher shop that day. Harriet tells Charlie that it was really nice of him to do that, and Charlie replies, "Nice? Evidently you think of me as a woman friend." As if A, there was something wrong with being nice, and B, there was something wrong with being a woman or a friend. Even if the script had been better, Mike Myers is so miscast for this part. His performance feels like an audition for Austin Powers and Shrek all rolled into one. It feels completely out of place for a dark romantic comedy. Maybe someday someone will remake it with a better script and a better lead, but until that day, I wouldn't recommend this movie. Number 8, Forces of Nature. Ben is headed to Georgia to marry his fiancée, only everything that could possibly go wrong does. Plane crash, fires, stolen wallets. In the process of surviving everything life is throwing at him, Ben meets Sarah, a literal force of nature who pushes him out of his comfort zone in a way that Ben didn't realize he needed. They travel together to Savannah, Ben trying to make it in time for his wedding, and Sarah wants to sell her shop before her soon-to-be ex-husband gets wind of it. This is another movie with a plot that I really enjoyed. I don't want to get into too much detail because part of the fun of this movie is not knowing where it's headed or how it might end, but it's a fairly enjoyable experience. Sandra Bullock and Ben Affleck do have some good chemistry in the moments that the character Ben allows himself to give in to his attraction to Sarah. I found it to be a pretty believable connection. Realistically, though, these two are in a very different place in their lives. I don't think Ben would ultimately be happy living the same way that Sarah does long term with all that chaos. Sarah is making an effort to change for the sake of her kid, but I think Ben would eventually feel too much like a wet blanket for her to put up with. But maybe not. Maybe they would eventually bring the right amount of chaos and stability to each other's lives. Originally, Forces of Nature wasn't supposed to be on this list of 10 romantic movies from the 1990s. I tried my best to not include the same leads in the same lists, separate the Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks movies, keep the Christian Slater films in separate videos. So originally this was going to be Hope Floats as my Sandra Bullock movie for the list. And I did watch most of it. If you haven't seen it, Hope Floats is about a woman named Birdie. She decides to move back home after her husband leaves her for her best friend. The movie is all about her navigating life back home while she struggles with her relationships with her mom and her daughter. The movie was pretty good until her love interest showed up. At first, he's charming, and even though Birdie's daughter doesn't like him, he takes her hostility really well. We later find out that this guy, Justin, had a crush on Birdie when they were in high school together, and basically he's been carrying a torch for her ever since. As a viewer, it's very clear that Birdie does not feel the same way about him. Even before he expresses an interest in dating her, she does whatever she can to avoid spending time with him. We don't really know if it's because she's genuinely just not interested or if she's still recovering from her divorce. But there's absolutely no doubt that Birdie is not interested in dating Justin. And yet, he keeps pushing, ignoring her nonverbal and verbal communication. It started to make me feel sick to my stomach every time he was on screen, and when he finally gets Birdie to sleep with him, he's livid when she still doesn't want to date him. And at that point, I just had to turn the movie off. Even if they somehow don't end up together at the end, the experience of watching was just too nauseating to continue. Forces of Nature isn't a perfect movie, but even so, it's way better than Hope Floats. Normally I hate in movies when everything goes wrong, but in Forces of Nature I was actually enjoying it because every time something would go wrong, it would just bring Sarah and Ben closer together and also push Ben out of his comfort zone, which he clearly needed a little bit of pushing. Even though it was a relatively enjoyable movie, I think you're safe not watching it. I wouldn't really recommend Forces of Nature, and I definitely wouldn't recommend Hope Floats. Number 7, The Truth About Cats and Dogs. Abby is a vet who hosts a radio show where she gives pet owners advice. One of her callers is a man named Brian. He's a photographer who happens to be dealing with a very confused dog on roller skates. After Abby helps Brian out, he asks to meet her. Abby assumes he doesn't want to actually meet her, a 5'1" brunette. Of course, this Brian guy is only going to be interested in a leggy blonde. So when Brian shows up at her studio, Abby has to beg her neighbor Noelle to stand in for her. Brian, who's already attracted to Abby's wit and intellect, becomes also attracted to her looks, and then the two are forced to keep up the ruse, so that Abby and then Noelle can continue spending time with Brian. Another movie with a great plot, this one taken straight from the play Cyrano de Bergerac, something like that. Even though I'm familiar with this play and I've already seen this movie before, that did not stop me from yelling at the TV when Abby doesn't fess up right away. If you've seen my other movies, you know how much I loathe an easily fixable miscommunication. I do love the chemistry between Ben Chaplin and Janine Garofalo. I'm over here kicking myself for never noticing before what an absolute babe this woman is. Uma Thurman is probably the worst part about this movie. Her acting isn't great, and I found her pretty annoying in moments where I think she was supposed to be charming. She's also referred to dumb a few times in the movie, which I didn't appreciate. I don't think she was ever dumb as a character. I think she just wasn't interested in the things that these two were connecting over. That doesn't make her dumb, you know? Speaking of connection, there is a ton of romantic foundation for the main couple. They seem to have unlimited number of things in common, plus a great chemistry in person. I don't doubt that they would have made a great couple from the very beginning. You know, if Abby hadn't lied about her looks. This movie can be summed up as two beautiful women with low self-esteem fighting for one man. I think this movie was supposed to be about friendship as much as it was about the romance, but for me, I didn't really buy the friendship between Abby and Noelle. Noelle calls Abby her best friend at one point in the movie, and I was like, huh? Like, since when? Their friendship does feel a little bit more natural by the end, but for most of the movie, they didn't feel very friendly towards each other. Specifically, Abby doesn't seem to respect Noelle very much. I really didn't like Brian's reaction when he finally found out the truth. It made me stop rooting for a character that I had really enjoyed for most of the movie. If I had been writing the script, I actually would have had Brian figure it out on his own. There's this moment in the movie when he sees Noelle go into the radio building just as Abby is starting her program. Instead of having the two women figure out how to keep the ruse going, I would have had him notice the inconsistency and then continue to investigate. There's another scene in the movie where he shows Abby a notebook that he wants to give to Abby. Noelle, but he thinks she's Abby. I think he tells her that he actually included a photo from the photo shoot that they did inside the notebook. If I was writing the script, I would have had him ask Abby to give it to Abby, and then later have her discover that the photo that he put inside the notebook was actually her photo, because he figured out that she's the real Abby, the one that he's in love with. I think that change would have made the movie so much better and made Brian a likable character throughout. As far as recommending this movie, I think it's a pretty decent one. I'd say if you're a fan of Uma Thurman, then give this one a watch, and if you find her annoying like I know some people do, you're probably better just passing on this one. Number 6, Before Sunrise. Jesse and Celine meet on a train headed to Vienna. Celine plans to stay on the train to make her way to Paris, but Jesse convinces her to get off with him in Vienna and keep him company while he waits for his plane ride the next day. They spend the day, evening, and next morning wandering the streets, talking about everything and nothing, as they grow closer and begin to fall for each other. This is an interesting yet simple plot that I think held a little bit more magic the first time I saw it. Rewatching it now, I found myself kind of bored. Sure, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy have some sweet moments together, but I remember there being more chemistry than there was. This second time around, the magic mostly just came from the conversations they had together. Some of them were profound and thought-provoking, while others were just silly. It's like being a fly on the wall watching two people fall in love in real time. Regarding romantic foundation, these are two fully formed characters with complex ideas. Sometimes they agree and sometimes they don't. I don't know how truly compatible they are since this is just one day in their romance, but there's certainly hope that the magic would continue. I feel like this was considered a very groundbreaking romance when it came out back in 1995. I personally didn't connect with this movie the way I think other people did. The characters are likable, the connection is believable, but I think for this movie to feel like it wasn't dragging, there needed to be more chemistry between Celine and Jesse. It wouldn't have had to be constant, but I think if we had gotten a level of chemistry that was similar to Connell and Marianne from Normal People, I think this movie would have landed better. For me, at least. If you've never seen Before Sunrise, I'd say give it a watch just for the experience. Otherwise, you can just pass on this one. I don't think it was quite as good as I remember it being. Number 5, Clueless. Cher is popular and rich. When she and her best friend Dion work together to romantically connect two of their teachers, Cher decides to play Cupid again for the new girl, Ty. Meanwhile, her stepbrother Josh is in town and uses her home as a hangout space when he's not at school, annoying the ever-loving shit out of Cher in the process. This movie is another loose adaptation based off of the Jane Austen novel, Emma. So the plot has the advantage of being a time-tested success. The connection between Cher and her love interest is alright. It's not the main point of the story, neither is it the driving force for any of the plot points. It's more of a happy conclusion to a fun movie. The chemistry's there. I definitely like the way that the love interest looks at Cher. I'm trying not to spoil it, just in case you happen to be one of the few that hasn't seen this movie yet. Romantic foundation-wise, these two characters are very different from each other, and I'm not sure how well that's gonna work in the long run. I feel like the things that these characters initially found annoying about each other end up being part of their charm by the end, but I think eventually that will turn back to annoyance once the honeymoon phase is over. I'm pretty sure this movie doesn't qualify as a romance based on my definition. Cher's interest in her crush serves as a distraction from meddling in the affairs of others, but I think she would have learned her lesson even without the romantic aspect. Either way, this movie is considered by most to be a rom-com, so here it is on the list. It's a very fun movie, and it has aged better than most. Definitely worth a watch if you've never seen it, and of all the movies that we've covered so far, this is easily the one that I've seen the most. Number 4, Fifth Element. Leeloo is the fifth element. She's meant to help save humanity from being destroyed by a dark force. In her attempt to get to those dedicated to helping her cause, she meets Corbin. He's retired military working as a taxicab driver. The plot of this movie is great. If you haven't seen it, you must watch it. There's not a ton of chemistry between the main characters, but the plot is very grand and romantic. When it comes to romantic foundation, I mean, we don't know a ton about Leeloo. She's clearly very intelligent and strong, very focused on her mission. I think I would have liked it if, while she was spending time learning the history of the universe, she also took a little time to learn English. I think if she was fluent in the language, we would have gotten to see more of a connection between her and Corbin. That's probably, honestly, the only thing I would change about this movie. The whole movie is based on the concept of the fifth element saving the universe by falling in love. It's a very romantic plot with very little romance. I can see why my friend, who is a huge fan of Fifth Element, didn't really agree with me when I told her I was going to classify it as a romance. But from my perspective, if Corbin hadn't fallen in love with Leeloo the minute he saw her, she would have never been able to save the universe. She would have been arrested and taken away and never gotten to where she needed to go. So based on my definition, this is a romance movie. There would be no story without the romantic plot. Does the movie itself feel very romantic? No. No, it doesn't. Like I said before, I think the main reason we don't get a lot of a connection between Leeloo and Corbin is because they don't speak the same language fluently. If she had learned the language, along with Kung Fu and everything else she learned while she was studying the history of the universe, I think we would have seen much more chemistry between Leeloo and Corbin. What these two needed was some witty banter to show off their connection and their chemistry. I would have also really liked to learn more about Leeloo and what her life was like before she was entombed in that mummy. How she feels about being the fifth element. We see a little bit of it at the end, a whisper of what could have been. I definitely would have liked more of that. If you've never seen Fifth Element or it's been a while, definitely put it at the top of your list. Number 3, French Kiss. Kate is afraid of flying, among other things, but when her fiancé goes to Europe without her and meets someone else, Kate has no other choice than to get on a plane and chase after him. On her way there, she meets Luke, whose interference in her life results in turning Kate's world even more upside down. The plot of this movie, woman chases after partner, and the experience pushes her out of her comfort zone and forces her to self-reflect and become a better version of herself, yada yada. It's good. It's a solid plot. You know, Kate and Luke are solid characters on their own, and by meeting each other, become better people because of it. I love the chemistry between Meg Ryan and Kevin Kline. I also love that two people that feel so mismatched at the beginning of the movie end up feeling so perfect for each other by the end. That aspect might be my favorite part of the story, other than the chemistry that the two actors create together. This movie definitely has the best chemistry of the bunch. We all know Meg Ryan is a master chemistry creator, but I love the way that Kevin Kline reacts to her character. It reminds me of the chemistry between Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Through the eyes of Ginger, we fall for Fred. The same thing happens in French Kiss. Through the eyes of Luke, we're able to see Kate in a different light. In the moments when she's being her genuine self, he looks at her like she's the most beautiful woman in the world. He sees the beauty of her imperfections when her ex couldn't. Here's the caveat. I spent probably the first 45 minutes of this movie super frustrated. It's another one of those movies where everything goes wrong, but unlike Forces of Nature, I did not enjoy watching the struggle. There's not 1 ounce, 1 speck of romantic chemistry between the main characters for the first half of the movie. It left me feeling super confused. Like I was sitting there arguing with the movie about whether it was a romance or not. Yelling at it like, what are you doing? What even are you? Because you're not a romance. You're not a comedy. None of this is funny. How in the world are you going to make these two an item? I was baffled for almost an hour. And then finally, Luke and Kate start connecting and the movie does a 180 and becomes this really wonderful romance. I feel like it would have been nice if maybe the first half of the movie could have had a little bit of chemistry between the two characters, given us more time to enjoy the chemistry that Meg Ryan and Kevin Kline create with each other. I'm not saying it had to be a lot, but there's like 0 spark for the first half of the movie. There's also a plot about a stolen necklace that has a conclusion that I didn't really like. I will say that I would have preferred if the character made the right choice instead of being tricked into it. As far as finding a place for this movie on the list, I had a hard time figuring out where I should rank it. As I said before, this movie has the best chemistry out of the bunch, but there isn't any chemistry for half the movie. I'd say the first half of this movie would have been placed at 10th place, and the second half of this movie would have been placed at 1st place. So naturally, I leaned more towards 5th place. Split the difference, Then I considered the plot and the romantic foundation and ended up putting the movie here at 3rd place. Should you see it? It's cute. It's lighthearted. It made me want to travel to Europe. I guess use your own discretion on this one. You know yourself better than I do. I ultimately enjoyed it, but it took me a while to get there. Number 2, Runaway Bride. Ike is a writer for a newspaper and decides to write a story about a woman famous for abandoning her grooms at the altar. Unfortunately, he gets a lot of the facts wrong and ends up getting fired for it. So when he hears Maggie is set to walk down the aisle again, he heads to her hometown to write another article about her. See if maybe she'll fail to get married once again. This is a really fun movie from start to finish. I love the plot and the way these two fall in love. Because Ike is investigating Maggie for his story, we get to learn a lot about her. We get to learn about this wonderfully flawed, multi-dimensional character. And Ike is interesting in his own ways. As they learn about each other's flaws, they start to fall for each other. When Maggie needs to take time to figure out who she is and what she wants, Ike doesn't get mad at her for it. He doesn't make her feel bad about taking the time. They both encourage self-reflection within each other. There's a decent amount of chemistry between the characters as well, especially in the church scene. But overall, I didn't get as much chemistry from them as I would have liked. There's not a ton to say about this movie other than it's light and enjoyable and it's aged pretty well. I love the additional relationship we get to see between Maggie and her sister Peggy, played by Joan Cusack. Like Bonnie Hunt, she often plays the friend in these 90s romance movies, and it's always a joy to see her on screen. This movie is worth both a watch and a rewatch. Number 1, What Dreams May Come. Chris and Annie are soulmates. When Chris dies unexpectedly while trying to help out during a car accident, Annie is unable to face life on her own. In the afterlife, Chris struggles to come to terms with his new surroundings. When he's informed that his wife has committed suicide, he ventures into hell to find her. This is one hell of a romantic movie. No pun intended. The actors themselves have a little bit of romantic chemistry. We don't get to see them interact a ton, but when they do, it feels believable that they've lived a whole life together. So of course they're going to have chemistry that feels different than, say, two people falling in love. The foundation for their love isn't something that we get to witness very much of. We meet them on the tail end of their journey together, so we just kind of have to take the movie's word for it that these two are soulmates. When it comes to plot, though, I can't think of much that's more romantic than venturing into hell to find your person. This movie is a romance, but it's also so much more than that. The visual effects are pretty dated. Honestly, of all the movies I've seen so far, this is the one that I would love to see get remade. The casting of Robin Williams is kind of confusing. Obviously, I'm grateful for the opportunity to get to watch him, but it's clear in a few scenes that his acting chops aren't quite up to the task. I still love him though, and I still cried way more than I expected to. Like, even more than The Notebook. Probably because there's this whole side plot with their children. That one hit me pretty hard. Like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. I personally don't believe in an afterlife, but I thought this imagining of it was pretty spectacular. And that's all the movies for today. I hope it's clear that the ranking and my review of these movies is purely based off of a romantic perspective. Am I saying that What Dreams May Come is a better movie than Fifth Element? No, absolutely not. I do, however, think that traversing through hell to find your soulmate is more romantic than last minute revealing your feelings for someone before the world ends. To be fair, this list was probably the hardest to rank so far. Other than the first two, the rest of the movies were really enjoyable to watch in their own ways. I love that this group of movies is filled with so many well-developed characters. The plots are good plots, but none of them are perfect movies. Well, perfect romantic movies. It really just came down to the tiny things. And I feel like if I ranked them all tomorrow, they would be in completely different order. If I were to suggest 3 movies to watch from this list, romance be damned, it would definitely be Fifth Element, Clueless, and What Dreams May Come. The best romantic movie of the bunch was probably Runaway Bride, just for its ease and simplicity. I ended up ranking What Dreams May Come above that because it was not only a great romance, but a really great concept. Really unique and original. One that I, again, would love to see get remade. My next video coming out should be a review of the book and the adaptation of The Idea of You. So there might not be another 90s romance video for a couple weeks. We've still got over 20 movies to go through though, so there will definitely be at least 2 more videos in this series. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end. Let me know what you think of these movies in the comments, and until next time.